These are some of the countries where the United States, directly and indirectly, has overthrown governments, manipulated elections, and attacked popular movements since 1945. Bush's war on terror is just another brand name replacing the Red Menace as justification for a systematic aggression. This is well documented, yet it remains a kind of secret history, seldom reported in the West as a war of terror.
When the BBC touched on the war on terror, they failed to include any of the relevant information, which showed how the arms, oil and finance industries had benefited. Later on in the programme, they trivialised the lies which have led to hundreds of thousands of deaths in Iraq.
We know they have weapons of mass destruction. We know they have active programs. There isn't any debate about it.
Those weapons of mass destruction have got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
9/11 was a key part of those lies, and whether an inside job or not, after it occurred, the US administration conspired to use it as justification for pre-planned wars. The conspiracy files failed to acknowledge this widely established view. After accepting the official story without examining all the evidence or setting it in context, the BBC also failed to scrutinise the background to the 9/11 Commission, or the impartiality of its key members.
We have found out that he not only served on the transition team of the Bush administration, that he was a person who wrote a draft memo for the setup of the Bush administration's National Security Council, that he was an individual who wrote the preemptive war strategy that was eventually used for the war in Iraq, that he is a close friend of Condoleezza Rice's. We want him to resign.
I don't believe for a minute that we got everything right. We wrote a first draft of history. People will be investigating 9/11 for the next 100 years in this country. And they're going to find out some things that we missed.
Only 3 critics of the official account were included in the programme. They were presented as cultish evangelists or dropouts, purportedly motivated by money, vanity or psychopathy.
All the zeal of an evangelist, a 23-year-old self-confessed dropout.
Those supporting the official story were never scrutinised. The BBC gave them extra gravitas by filming them in grandiose surroundings and introducing them with authoritative language.
Popular Mechanics is an American institution, a no-nonsense nuts and bolts magazine, writing about technology since the days of Henry Ford and the Wright brothers.
9/11 truth researchers were filmed at home. The BBC varied its camera work according to the viewpoint of the interviewee. This manipulation served only to highlight and accentuate the programme's bias. Loaded language often gave misleading impressions to the viewer, and the on-screen imagery was repeatedly deceptive.
Many personal items were also recovered, including this hijacker's passport and a bandana, which may have been worn by one of the hijackers.
The conspiracy files devoted considerable time to showing the distress supposedly caused by 9/11 truth campaigners to the survivors and relatives of the deceased.
When I hear these conspiracy theories, it hurts me a lot. In general, people need a scapegoat. They need to say, this is why it happened. So I think that's why people come up with these crazy theories. People like to have someone to blame.
It did not, however, choose to include groups who continue to campaign for a new inquiry. This programme was not just an insult to them, but to the memory of the deceased.
The 911 emergency tapes and recordings, plus 500 interviews done with the fire department right after 9/11. All that material has been withheld from the public.
The suggestion that the 9/11 Truth movement is anti-Semitic was another misrepresentation designed to increase resentment towards campaigners.
The corporation cannot be allowed to get away with this. It sets a very dangerous precedent. That it's somehow acceptable for the BBC to whip up hatred against minority activist groups, or that it's acceptable for the BBC to undermine historical truth, or it's acceptable for the BBC to undermine faith in the public record. By presenting a distorted and selective view of the 9/11 evidence, the BBC took a particular view on a controversial matter of public interest. This is in clear contravention of its own guidelines. Thanks to an unpaid army of researchers and reviewers, united in their quest for the truth and unperturbed by the sometimes vicious media criticism, a massive difference is being made. It is up to us to seize the day. If we do not, we will live under the jackboot of tyranny. And the time to stand up and take responsibility is now.
I'm glad I was caught. I was mentally deranged. Now I am cured. I ask only for you to accept my love of our leader. I ask only to be shot while my mind is still clean.
It's going to be here, this police state, we're going to be living in it in a blink of an eye, and everyone's going to be going, "Blimey, how did that happen? How did that happen?" You know, and so it's very important, I feel, to expose this agenda, to get the message out now as much as possible, so that people, when this is what happens, you tell them these things, and it puts a seed in their mind, and they go away and they won't always agree with you, but then as soon as that seed is there, they start seeing things in the media. They start seeing all this stuff about biometric ID cards. They start seeing these peculiar inconsistencies with the so-called war on terror. And they start adding these things up. You know, Christ, you know, that guy was right. You know, it's not making sense. It is all a lie. It is all just to take our rights away, to control us all. And so, you know, it's so important that I and all the other activists who are involved in this get the message out to as many people as possible. Because if all these people know, then they can't further this agenda, they can't get away with it. So that's why I do what I do.